All right, welcome everyone to the Torah study this week, Parshas Vayeira, and the topic is the Jewish take on hospitality, inviting guests greater than seeing God Himself. So we grew up on inviting guests every time. We're up in Yerushalayim, my parents, my mother's das angezunt, always with my father, Halav Shalom, inviting guests on Shabbos. And we know it's a Jewish thing. Sometimes people ask, we invite guests, and it can be very nice, very pleasant to have some guests, but sometimes it can get a little too much. Some people will overstay their stay. They want to sit and gossip, and you're busy. You want to do other things. So, what is it? How much do we really have to go beyond our norms to go and make sure to invite guests? And we're going to learn something very interesting from this week's Torah portion about Avraham Avinu. Avram, our father Abraham, he was known for the big Machnis Oirech, the one who invited guests. And we'll learn from today's portion how inviting guests is even greater than greeting God Himself. But as we did the last few lessons, we mentioned that we are learning, the way we learn our lessons here this year is looking at the Rashi commentary, the way Rashi explains the simple meaning of the verse. And we mentioned that there are many rules how Rashi simply explains a simple understanding of what the verse says. Rashi says, "Ani lo ibasi elo lefarish lepshuta shel mikra." I came to explain the very simple explanation of the verses. So we're going to read the first few verses in the Torah portion and see how Rashi explains the story and analyze why Rashi explains the way he does. So we are talking about the story with Avraham Avinu. We ended last week's Torah portion about Hashem telling Avram to circumcise himself at the age of 99. And he did, of course. And then on the third day, Avram was very sick. He felt very bad. And what our sages tell us, that Avram, being that he was always busy taking and hosting guests and feeding them, so Hashem wanted to make it easier. He shouldn't be so busy with hosting guests. So what he did, Hashem took out the sun, made it a very, very hot day, and this way, he figured no guest will pass by. It was the middle of the desert. No one is. The travelers are not traveling in such a hot day. However, Avraham Avinu, although he felt he was very sick, but still the pain of not being able to host guests, that was by him was worse than the pain that he suffered. So he was sitting in the tent at the beginning, in the opening of the tent, and waiting for guests to come. And this is when Hashem comes and appears to Avraham, and Hashem speaks to Avraham. And right there in the middle, Hashem sees his pain that he suffers not having guests. So he summons 3 angels that they should come and appear as humans, And as soon as Avraham saw them, Avraham ran over to them and he invited them and asked them to come and join them. So let's see how these few verses inside, and then we'll see how Rashi explains it, and we'll ask some questions. So, this is a few rules that we're going to come across today, the way Rashi, the rules, how he explains. So number one, Rashi only translates words if the translation is not obvious. It doesn't translate every single word. If the translation is not obvious, Rashi gives a comment and it brings the translation the way he sees. Number two, Rashi always translates words the first time they appear in the Torah. Number three, Rashi only uses two explanations when each is incomplete. As we'll see in today's lesson, that Rashi uses two explanations, and we need to understand why he needs the two explanations. So bear with us. Number four, of the two explanations, whenever Rashi brings down two explanations, the first will always be a better fit with the plain meaning of the text. So again, when he brings two explanations, it is because each one of them are not perfect. Each one of them is not perfect, and therefore he needs two, and the one that is a better fit to the plain meaning of the text, that's what he brings first. And finally, number five, Rashi only cites the source of his translation or explanation when it helps to explain something. So Rashi obviously brings his interpretations, his translations, explanations, it brings us from different sources. Could be from the Talmud, could be from the Medrash, from many places. But he never brings down, he never tells us where the source is, unless it helps us understand the meaning of the verse. Okay, so those are, maybe they sound like cryptic codes, rules, but you're going to find that it's very simple as we go along in the reading of the verses of the Torah. So we begin with this verse. The Torah says as follows. As we said before, Avraham was sitting. Hashem appeared to Avraham as he was sitting in the tent of the Ohel, the opening of the tent. And he sees three people. They were angels that appeared to be to him as human beings. So the Torah says, he ran toward them from the opening of his tent and prostrated himself to the ground. And then verse 3 says as follows, Vayeira, and he said, my Lord, if I have found favor in your eyes, please do not pass your servant by. Now, who is he talking to? If you read in the Hebrew, Vayomar, and he said, Aleph Daled Nun Yud. This sounds like the name of God, right? Baruch Atah, say Ado, and then Nai. So, but this word has actually two meanings. When we refer to Hashem, it means my Lord, Hashem. And the word Adon means a master. When you say to a person, you say my master, you say Adoni, my master. When you say my masters, you can also say Adonai, my masters, or my lords. Okay? So here, the question is, whom is Avraham talking to? When he said he sees the three angels, the three humans, what he thought they were humans, and he says to them, that's what it sounds like, he ran over to them, and he says, my masters, it could be read like my masters talking to the angels, or it could be that he's talking to God, because God is in the middle of a conversation with God. God just appeared to him. So that is what Rashi is explaining. He says, we need to see what's going on over here. Whom is Avraham talking to? So here we read what Rashi explains. And we're going to ask a few questions in this Rashi. So first Rashi says as follows. Lagodel Shebe'emama. He was talking to the leader of the angels. And again, he thought it were humans. So he saw the three angels, and he saw one of them appeared to be the leader, and he says to him, what did he say to him? If he spoke to the leader, but he referred to all of them as my lords, but I addressed them all as lords. He addressed the words, please do not pass your servant by. Okay? In Hebrew, in English, there's no difference between plural and singular. Please do not pass. Do not pass. You can say it to two people, please do not pass. And you can say it to one person, please do not pass. But in Hebrew, it makes a difference. In Hebrew, we read over here, in the Torah, it says, al na ta'avor, in singular. It says, al na ta'avor ma'alavdecha, do not pass. He speaks to one person. All right? So Rashi explains what's going on over here. He speaks to all of them, it calls them my masters, and then he goes on to say in a singular form, do not pass. In a singular, like speaking to one person. So that's why Rashi says he was talking to the leader of the angels, but addressed them all as lords. And he addressed the words, please do not pass your servant by, to the leader. But he intended for all three to stay. And he figured if the leader would stay, so would his companions. So according to this version, that word, what we mentioned, Adonai, refers to the mundane interlocutor, not to God. Okay? That's one explanation. So basically what Rashi is saying, when he's talking to when he says, when he says Vayomar, and he says Adonai, he's talking to the servants, to the angels. He's not talking to Hashem. But then Rashi brings another explanation. He says another explanation is that word, when he says Hashem, is a sacred honorific. And he was telling God to wait for him as he ran to tend the wayfarers. Okay? So the second interpretation, Rashi says that Avraham, and again, the verse says he saw Hashem appear to him, and then he sees three people, and he runs over to them, and he prostrated to them, and then he says to Hashem, God, please wait for me. Do not pass. I have something more important to do. If I find favor in your eyes, please wait for me. That's what the second interpretation. Okay, so that's clear. We have two interpretations. One interpretation that he spoke to the angels, another interpretation that he spoke to God himself. And then finally, Rashi brings the source. And he says that both interpretations are found in the Medrash Rabbah. And now we have the questions on this Rashi. First of all, why does Rashi offer two interpretations, two explanations? Rashi wants to explain the simple understanding. What's wrong with giving one explanation? And number two, why did Rashi begin with the unusual translation? You see, when we say that word, Hashem, everywhere in the Bible, that refers to God. So why does Rashi begin, even if he has a reason to say that he's talking to the angels, if he chooses to bring both explanations, a simple explanation, that word is God. Why is that explanation second? In most cases, this honorific refers to God. Why not simply say Avraham is talking to God and leave the unusual translation for later? If you want to, for whatever reason, you want to say that he's referring to the angels, bring it as a second explanation. Rashi doesn't do that. He does the first explanation. He says that he's talking to the angels. And then the second explanation, he's saying that he's talking to God. Okay? And finally, question number three. Question number three is, why does Rashi conclude by citing the source of the translations? As we said before, Rashi says that those both interpretations are in the Medrash. Rashi usually doesn't bring their source. Why did it bring the source? So really, in order to understand the questions, the Rebbe says we have to look at the rest of the story. What happened after? What did Avraham say after this? So here's the other two verses. He speaks to the angels and he says to them, please, let some water be taken to bathe your feet, and then recline under the tree, and I will fetch some bread and sustain your hearts, and then you can travel onwards. For after all, you have passed by your servant, and they said, we will do as you said. So basically, when you read the rest of the story, it seems the very simple understanding of this verse is that he's talking to the angels. Because it doesn't say that he said to God, and then again he said the rest of the story. It says only one time, Vayomar, and he said, my masters, my lords, do not pass. And then he says, take some water, wash your feet, lean under the tree. Whom is he talking to? Obviously, he's not talking to God to do these things. He's talking to the angels. He's talking to the guests. So that is why, basically, Rashi brings that interpretation that is talking to the guest as a first interpretation, because that's the most common sense. That's the most simple understanding of the verse, right? As the Rebbe says, it says, considering that verse 4 does not begin with the words, and he said, right? It doesn't begin with the words, and he said. That means that it's a continuation of before. The same saying you said before, my Lord, continues. So obviously it's talking to the same people. It follows that verses 3 and 4 comprise a single statement. If the offer for water was made to the wayfarers, the 5-year-old understands that the beginning of the statement was also not directed at God, but at the wayfarers. Okay? So that explains one question. Question number 2, we asked why does Rashi choose first the the interpretation that he spoke to the, not to God, but he spoke to the angels, is because when you read it in the context of the whole story, it sounds like he's talking to the angels. That's the most common sense understanding of it. However, there is still other problems. Why does Rashi choose other interpretations? Because there are other problems in this verse. What is the problem? The problem is, if he speaks to three people, addresses three people, why is he talking to a single person in a singular form? Do not pass. As we said before, in English it's the same, but in Hebrew, al nata avor, do not pass, is talking to a singular. That's what bothers Rashi. He reads the simple understanding, the simple reading in the verse, and he says, this verse says, and he said, my master, do not pass. Okay? So that's what bothers Rashi. That's why you need another interpretation. Okay, Rashi does answer question number 2. Rashi opens with Avram addressing the wayfarers as first option, because even though it's not the usual use of the honorific Hashem, it makes more sense to the child because of the flow of the passages. However, what bothers Rashi, why didn't Avram greet in the plural? Why did he talk to three people in a singular language? And what is the answer? Okay, why didn't Avram address the wayfarers in plural form? So Rashi says Avram was talking to the leader of the three wayfarers. So that's how he explains it. He meets the people. He says, "My masters," and then he turns to the leader of them and says, "Please do not pass." And he figures the rest of them also will not pass. And then he invites them all to says, "Please wash your feet." And this, by the way, is also in plural. It goes back to plural. Wash your feet, lean under the tree. That is talking again in plural. But when he told them do not pass, he speaks to the leader. He addressed them all as lords. Okay. And as we said, he addressed the leader with the words, "Please do not pass by." But he intended for all three to stay, because if the leader would stay, so would his companions. So everything seems okay, right? So now Avram spoke in the singular because he was addressing only the leader. However, when he said, "My lords," he was referring to all of them. The reason why Avram only addressed the leader was because he was confident that if the leader stopped, the others would follow. So what's the problem with that? So first of all, this answers question number 1. Rashi brings 2 explanations. Why? Because both contain slight flaws that bother the 5-year-old. Either way, the verse do not make sense in a simple understanding. If you explain that he's talking to God, then the question is, why is it then right after we see that he's talking to the angels, tells them go eat something? Obviously, sounds like he's not talking to God. But if you explain that he's talking to the angels, there is a little problem there also. Why is he talking to the singular? In a single word, do not pass, right? So if he's talking to the singular, so we explained that yes, he's talking to the singular, he's talking to the leader of them. But still, that's not very polite. If you're talking to, you want to invite them all, why don't you invite them all? So basically, this verse tells you that you need to understand it not in the simple way. In other words, Rashi always explains the Torah in the most simple, plain meaning. But there are certain verses in the Torah that force us to say that the Torah gives us some other hints. It's not just a simple meaning. And that is why Rashi also quotes and says that both of these interpretations are taken from the Medrash. The Medrash is not about only explaining the simple meaning of the verse. The Medrash is bringing allegoric and bringing messages. So Rashi says that the verse itself is one of those verses that compel us to look a little deeper. That there is a deeper message here that the Torah tells us. And the deeper message is by understanding that it is talking to the angels, and also he's talking to God, saying to God, please do not pass. I want to go and greet the guests. So that's what we want to talk about now. Avraham Avinu, he's, after reaching that great revelation, he's being circumcised. He reached the completeness of his connection and purification, and Hashem appears to him. And then he sees people. And he sees guests and he runs. He leaves that great revelation. God is talking to him. He drops the conversation with God and goes and meets the people. I mean, he's sitting in front of a king, and somebody's knocking on the door, and he say, okay, I'm sorry, I want to greet somebody else. You're in front of the king. And you're talking about Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu, the one who is so devoted to Hashem. How is it that Avraham saw angels? He saw something else while he's talking to Hashem, and he attends to them, and he pays attention to them. That's the question. How could Avraham leave God's presence to tend the guest? In the Rebbe's words, the Rebbe is asking the question. Avraham was in a state where God revealed himself to him, and in this state, how could he look at, let alone notice, the three wayfarers? You're with Hashem. Shouldn't you, all your concentration to be with Hashem, with God, and nothing else? How could he pay them enough heed to be impelled to run towards them? When standing before God, even a single unnecessary bodily motion is out of question. Paying such close attention to anyone or anything is perforce prescribed. It's totally unacceptable. And this would be true of anyone standing before God. How much more so Avraham, whose experience of standing before God was so much more powerful and superior. How could he, at the very same time, notice the three wayfarers? Well, this led our sages to indeed learn the lesson from here, that welcoming guests is such a great mitzvah, it surpasses greeting Hashem. This is from the Talmud. Amar Rav Yehuda, Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav, hospitality, achnasat orchim, literally means bringing in guests, is greater than hosting God. As the passage states, and he said, my Lord, if I have found favor in your eyes, do not pass your servant by. So here we see the Talmud interpreting that verse in the Torah as the second interpretation, what Rashi says, that Avraham indeed was talking to Hashem. And he's saying to Hashem, please do not pass. Do not pass. So Avraham leaving God's presence to tend to his guests tells us that hospitality is more important than hosting God. So now the question is, okay, we know that. Now we know that. From Abraham, we know that this is the case. When Abraham said to Hashem, wait. So we know from here, we know that hospitality, hosting guests, is more important. The question, though, is, how did Avraham know it? How did Avraham know it? Nobody told him. He's standing in front of Hashem, and he sees guests. Now from him, we learn that that's the case, that's more important. How did he know it? All right? How did Avraham know that leaving God to care for guests was correct and acceptable? So here's one interesting explanation. It's given by Rabbi Chaim Alter Panet. And he says as follows. He says, a tzaddik, a person on the level of Avraham Avinu, he does not need anybody to tell him what the right thing. He's completely devoted to Hashem. And basically, his instinct tell him the right thing to do. If he feels that this is the right thing to do, it is a godly instinct. You know, it's there's a story of the Rebbe Rashab, I believe, when he was among colleagues among other rabbis. And there was one thing that I think it was about washing the hands. People were used to wash the hands. People were used to wash the hands 2 times. And the Rebbe Rashab was washing 3 times. So this other rabbi asked him, how did he know this? How do you know this? So he said, I'm not sure yet. I'm not sure right now. But since my bar mitzvah, I've trained my body to follow halacha, to do the way things has to be done. That means there are people who are trained, they're tzaddikim. They're used to do things. What is the right thing to do? I just realized, I'm sorry, someone asked, how did he know who the leader was? How did Avraham know which of the angels is the leader? I don't know. Maybe he was wearing a more expensive kafiyah. I'm not sure. It could be. It was maybe the way he was dressed like the leader. Maybe the other people were serving him. So back to our discussion. So Avraham was in that level of a tzaddik, that when he saw the angels, saw the people, and he's sitting with God, and he felt that is going, it needs to go there. And it reminds me, I saw somewhere else, and it says when Hashem told Avraham to bring his son as an offering on the altar, Yitzchak. And we know that Hashem didn't want him to slaughter Yitzchak, it was just a test. But he told him to bring him up as an offering. Avram thought that that's what Hashem wants. And the Torah says, Vayishlach et yado, vayikach et ha'ma'achelet. He sent his arm and he took the knife. Meaning it wasn't a normal thing for him. It wasn't an automatic thing to go and take the knife to slaughter his son. He had to send his hand. He had to do something against his own will. Why? Avram was doing Hashem's will naturally. But in this case, that wasn't Hashem's desire to go slaughter Yitzchak. I don't remember who said that. But in any case, he said this statement that Avram sent his arm and he took the knife in order to slaughter Yitzchak, and that's when the angel stopped him. So that is similar to this concept, the idea that Avraham, when he saw the angels, and he straight ran towards them, that was his instinct. His instincts, Avram's instincts, is holy instincts. So let's see it inside. And again, this is from Rabbi Chaim Alter Benet, and he says, we can explain this based on what is written in sacred tomes, that utterly righteous people sanctify their limbs until they move spontaneously to do God's bidding. This is why King David said, my feet carry me to the house of study. Avram's feet ran towards the guest. Though God was present in his home, this told Avraham that hospitality is more important. This is the meaning of the passage. And he saw, it says, Vayeira, Avram saw Vayeira tzlikrasam. What did he see? And he saw and he ran towards them. So he interprets it that way. He saw that he was running spontaneously towards the guest. From this, he discerned that this mitzvah was greater than hosting the divine. So the fact that his feet lifted him and took him in that direction told him that this was the right thing to do. That was Avram. Okay? So we understand from this story how important it is receiving of the guest, even more important than hosting Hashem himself. But the question is, why? Why? But why? Why is it that hosting guests is such an important thing? And the answer is because hosting guests, when you host guests, you're acting godly. It's not like you're going away from hosting Hashem to go host a guest. It is Hashem acting through you by hosting the guest. As the Talmud says, Rabbi Chama, the son of Rabbi Hanina, said, what is the meaning of the passage? Walk behind God, your God. Is it even possible to walk behind God if the Torah states God, your God, is a consuming fire. Rather, it means to emulate God's traits. As God clothes the naked, so should you. As God visits the sick, so should you. As God comforts the mourner, so should you. As God buries the dead, so should you. And the Talmud brings us different verses when God did what he did, visiting the sick. He visited Avraham. So when we run to host a guest, we are not leaving God behind. We are going with God. God is working through us. Imagine you host a good friend you didn't see in a long time. You're very happy to sit and host. It's a freezing cold night, and then someone is knocking on the door. And he looks out the window and says, your friend's son is outside. Now you're involved in now hosting your guest, your precious friend. You didn't see him in years. You want to spend time with him. What are you going to get up in the middle and go attend somebody else? But guess what? The somebody else is not a stranger. This is your friend's son. Your friend's son is waiting outside in the freezing cold. If you're going to go and leave your guest and go bring his son, attend his son, you're not leaving your guest. Your guest's heart is with his son already. He's there. So when you go out there and bring him in and hosting the guest, you are hosting your friend. That is the idea. The same is about Hashem. When we host God's child, we show the incredible love for God. After all, the person knocking on the door is a total stranger for us. But we rejoice because that person is God's child. So when you tend to a stranger, you help him out, you host him, you feed him, you're not going away from Hashem, you're acting godly. You're bringing Hashem with you. So when we run to host a guest, we're not leaving God behind. We are drawing near to God by doing precisely as He would do. So hosting God's child demonstrates our love for God. And this is Rabbi Eliyahu Moyal quotes the Slonim Rebbe. He says, the reason why this is so great is explained by Rabbi Baruch Shalom Berezovsky, the Rebbe of Slonim, and author of Netivat Shalom. He says, if you greet your friend with joy, it doesn't demonstrate the true extent of your friendship. Greeting his child with joy, rejoicing, only because it is your friend's child, demonstrate the great love you have for your friend. If not for your friendship, why would you associate with this child? So when you honor Jews in your home, because they are God's children, you demonstrate the love for God that burns in you, much more so than receiving God Himself with pomp and ceremony. So this is the lesson we'll learn from here. If you would walk away from God to invite a guest, how much more so does this principle apply with regard to giving up on work and certainly leisure? We asked the question in the beginning. Sometimes hosting guests is not so convenient. But if you see the importance of it, you would look away from conveniences and make sure to host God. And the Baal Shem Tov said, my mentor, the Baal Shem Tov, taught me the meaning of our sage's statement that hosting our fellow is greater than hosting God. He asked, since God doesn't reveal himself to us, how does this statement apply to us? And the answer is that we host God when we study the Torah. Accordingly, the meaning of our sage's statement is this: although hospitality prevents us sometimes from studying the Torah and causes us to engage in idle chatter, gossip, etc., it is still the greater merit. There's a story in a small town of Gostinin. There was a tzaddik there, the Rebbe of Gostinin, Rabbi Yechiel Michel of Gostinin. And it was a one cold winter night. There was a person passing by. It was freezing, and he was looking for a place to stay, and he couldn't find a place. And he finally sees one of the houses, the light is lit, and he knocks on the door. And the guy opens up, Yechiel Michel, and he was very happy to greet him. He gives him something to drink, something hot, and he gives something to eat. And it was not, he ate something, and then he was still hungry. So the Rebbe himself went, and he went into the kitchen. He never cooked, but he took some, whatever, prepared something, and he gave him, and he fed him. And after he ate, the Rebbe gave him his own bed for the guests to go to sleep. He didn't have much there. He didn't have extra guest room or something. He gave him his, and he sat down, continued to study the Torah the whole night. The next morning, the guest gets up, fresh, rested, and goes to the synagogue. And the Rebbe also goes to the synagogue. And lo and behold, he realizes who is his host. The host is the Rebbe of the town. He was so embarrassed. He was so ashamed. And he asked the Rebbe, forgiveness, please forgive me, apologize. He says, apologize for what? What are you talking about? I hosted you. I said, no, please. I didn't know you, the Rebbe. I disrespected you. I let you do to cook for me, to give you your bed to give. And the Rebbe said, well, I don't know what you're talking about. Finally, he insisted, and the Rebbe told him, listen, I can forgive you on one condition. He wasn't sure. He said, okay, yeah, I'll do anything. So he says, the condition is that the next time you come to town, you don't go anywhere else, you come to my house. That was the condition. The hosting the guest is a very important mitzvah. What does it mean to us? How do we host guests? It could be simply hosting guests for Shabbos dinner or anything else. Or when you come to shul, when you see someone new coming into shul, make them comfortable. That is part of hosting guests, making someone comfortable. Give them the seat, guide them, invite them to join. You have a stranger in the street that doesn't know what a shul is. Invite him to shul, invite him to your home. But the same thing is in shul also. Whenever you do something to host guests, it is greater than receiving God himself. Why? Because that's exactly what Hashem wants from us. The Rebbe explained this also in the Maimar, that Avraham Avinu, when he had the godly revelation, what did he do? He let go of that revelation to go do a mitzvah, to go help someone. And says the Rebbe, that's the lesson. It's not just by hosting guests. Anytime, even if you have a chance to grow yourself spiritually in the highest levels, And here you have an opportunity to go assist someone else, assist a Jew, whether physically, spiritually, any way you can help another Yid, another Jew. That is greater than that passive revelation you get from above, because there you're being actively acting godly. It's not just passive revelation that you receive. And finally, to conclude the story of the Baal Shem Tov himself, the story of the Baal Shem Tov's parents. The story was told by the Frierdiker Rebbe, received it from generations in tradition, and the Baal Shem Tov's parents, Rabbi Eliezer and Sarah, they were barren. They couldn't have children. They were very wealthy people, and they always did the mitzvah of Achnasas Orchim very well, always having and Shabbos 30, 40 guests, and always welcoming them, feeding them, and they will sleep and stay till Sunday afternoon, and he would accompany them, and so on. And then one Shabbos, it was Shabbos afternoon. They were in the little shtetl, and he had lots of guests by the table. And then there walks in the middle of the Shabbos, someone looks like a Jew, a beggar, with his clothing, with his pekalach, coming into town and coming knocking on the door, wants to join the Shabbos. It was obvious that this man violated the Shabbos. Now, obviously back then everybody was keeping the Torah, the mitzvahs, the Shabbos, everything was kept. And seeing that person coming from outside of town, coming to the shtetl is violating, going outside of the borders where you're allowed to go on Shabbos. And the Rabbi Eliezer didn't pay any attention to what he did. He invited him to the table. He asked him, "Did you make Kiddush?" He said, "No." Gave him wine, "Please make Kiddush." The other guests were very upset. "How dare you? How could you treat him so respectfully?" They said to him, even Avraham Avinu, when he invited guests to his house, he gave them food to eat, but he made sure that they bless Hashem, they do the right thing. They say the bracha. And you tell him, inviting this guest who violates the Shabbos. He was very upset. And he went back to his room and he started crying. Wasn't sure. But then he felt, that guest must be so embarrassed. I have to wipe up my tears. And he goes back out to go to attend to the guest, to give him what he needs. And like this, he fed him the whole Shabbos. The next day, he slept over that night. And the next Sunday afternoon, he accompanied him in the street, walking him out on his way. And there on his way, this guest told Rabbi Eliezer, "I want you to know that I am Eliyahu Hanavi. I am the prophet Elijah. And I came from above to test you in the mitzvah of Achnasas Orchim, how well you will do this mitzvah of hosting the guest. And you passed the test, and because of that, you will have a special child, the holy Jew." And that was the Baal Shem Tov. And he told he told him what to say, that they were already very old, and he passed away when the Baal Shem Tov was very young. And he told them what to tell the Baal Shem Tov when he was young, before they pass away, that he shouldn't fear anyone, he should love every Jew, and so on. And that is the story of the birth of the Baal Shem Tov. So, thank you all for joining, and Bezat Hashem, we should be zoche to do this mitzvah and to receive the Shechina of Hashem himself with Mashiach.
Amen, Rabbi. Thank you.
You're very, very welcome.
Thank you, Rabbi Cohen.
You're welcome. Should be only Mesuris Toivus.
Thank you.
Rabbi
Have a
Cohen.
good night. Yeah.
Good night, good night. Yes, Laser.
Can I call you after this session?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Okay. I'll see you. All the best.
The
Thank
question,
you, Rabbi Cohen.
Yes.
the question was, how did Avraham know who the leader was of the three?
Oh, yeah, I addressed it. I mentioned, I'm not sure how I knew it, but I said maybe he was wearing a special kafia with gold around it or something. It's
One angel better than another?
what?
Are some angels better than other ones?
Well, they came in form of people. He didn't know they were angels.
Uh-huh.
That's why he fed them.
And
Rabbi Cohen.
Yes, Gail.
using the
Okay.
word, do we assume he used that for everybody? He called everyone Lord?
Yeah, that's what Rashi says. He called them all the lords is plural. So he called them all lords. He didn't say Lord. Okay, so this word, when you're speaking to Hashem, it's singular. It's talking to Hashem. But when you use that word to speak to people, then it's plural. That is plural. So he's called them all my lords. Yeah, again, what's your question?
Well, was it the way they were dressed that my question, I guess, is...
That I answered. I'm not sure myself how he knew, but I just guessed. I said maybe he was dressed different. Maybe sometimes when people go by, you could see that he's the leader. The other people listen to. I mean, when you see people, you see a gang. If you know, you can identify who's the head of the gang, right? Sometimes.
Okay. Who the rabbi is, yeah.
Okay.
All
Yeah.
right.
All right. Yeah, Gannon, you had a question, Gannon?
Yeah, I wanted to, I don't know if it's going to diverge it in a different direction, but I was always wondering in this parsha, Akedah, binding of Yitzchak at the end, we recited before Shacharit every morning. I understand, of course, the significance of the the test and there, but I'm seeing maybe I'm missing something in terms of some midrash or something. The fact that we're reciting every day, we're reading it every day. What significance does it play? Is it something maybe bigger picture that I also don't see? I just wanted to get your maybe an input on that.
Well, it says, "Ma'aseh avot siman labanim." All what our ancestors did, everything is paving the way for us. So the sacrifices that they did for us. This test was the ultimate test that God tested Abraham, and the fact that Abraham passed that test, the fact that Yitzchak also was ready to be offered as a sacrifice is the ultimate test. So this is one of the things that keeps us and to protect us. Hashem, we can constantly daven every single day to remind Hashem about this great sacrifice what our ancestors did for Him.
Okay, thank you.
More depth, but that's the simple explanation.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
All righty. Have a good night. Thank you so much.
Yes, have a good night.
Mm-hmm. Bye bye.